What's up, people? This is Dylan Fox, bringing to you a special update because we have some breaking news. It's outside the norm. I've done this in the past on the Patreon before, but this story was so vital, so big, I wanted to get out ahead of it to everybody out there listening on to our wonderful feed. This will not be a very long show. Striga is not here. We will see what he has to say about all of this at a later date, for sure. I'm sure he won't hesitate. Even on his Twitter page, X page, I guess, if you want to read what he's got to say. But we are so early into it, it might be a little better to wait a little bit, some people would say. But, I really wanted to talk about this now because I think what happened is big, yes, but it's more like a symptom of a greater story that we're witnessing unfold to all of us, in real time. So, first and foremost, literally the day after we posted our latest show, which is very good, everybody should check that out. We talked about so much stuff on there. Striga was on that, obviously. We had a lot to talk about. But one day later, New Japan announced that Jeff Cobb was leaving the company and vacating the tag team titles, and they announced next month's main event, which is Callum Newman versus Hiroki Goto. Now, that's a whole discussion for a different time. I'll save the Callum Newman talk. But, that was kind of the first domino to fall, and we've seen a couple of more, and I'm about to get into all of that. Like, you guys know exactly who I'm talking about, of course. But let's keep it to Cobb for now before we get to LIJ. So Cobb, there were these rumors that they even worked into their storylines heading into the New Japan Cup. They talked openly about him perhaps being on his way out, maybe under a WWE interest. And I thought that was probably one of the better ways to handle all of this until what happened. And this is a part we're going to get into more. So at Sakura Genesis, they won the tag team titles from Naito and Hiromu. It made very little sense at the time, and even less sense after he announced that he was vacating the titles. But it was a sign of things to come. I will admit, I was very confident that the reason they did this flash title switch was to clear up Naito to go after Goto. On paper, the biggest match they would have currently in New Japan Pro Wrestling, and a perfect signal to put them against each other in the Dominion main event one more time. But, what we found out later showed that there's a lot there. A lot going on behind the scenes that maybe we weren't thinking about at the time. Losing Cobb, by the way, comically, when Cobb won the title, he pointed to the camera and was like, "I thought I was leaving, internet, what happened?" And then he leaves like a couple of days later. Why did he do that? Very funny. Looking back at it as the past, and I will look at it for all three people I'm going to talk about today. Cobb, he was a good mid-card guy for, New Japan. I'm not going to really disparage his run too much. It wasn't like he was this big difference maker by any stretch of the imagination. And I have to say, when he first came in, I really wasn't a big fan. I thought he was kind of overrated because he came in with a big reputation. For a while, he was a top indie guy. And obviously, a lot of people knew him for his Lucha Underground run. As Matanza. And that was a well-booked run for sure. But when I watched him wrestle, he really didn't, he didn't grab me. Let's put it that way. Just as a pure talent. But that was a big push, and it was very meaningful. Like, no doubt about that at all. I'm not taking anything away from all of that, you know. Like, you know, nobody can deny such a thing is true, that Lucha Underground had a legacy. It fizzled out, of course, but, you know, that doesn't mean it wasn't meaningful to a lot of people. I feel like by the end, I mean, when I was doing Lucha Talks, literally the other two wouldn't even watch, like, the last season. I think the only two people left was me and Cubs fan. Like, we were the last two standing to watch Lucha Underground. Much like the Blue Demon telenovela, where it was me and Fredo, which were the last ones that watched it. Maybe Cubs watched that too, which was much more entertaining than the last season of the Lucha Underground, I will say. So, but he comes in, like, coming in 2018. Like I said, he was a hyped guy, worked, you know, he won the Battle of Los Angeles that year when it still had some cachet. It wasn't like its peak, you know, a few years earlier by any means. You know, PWG's peak to a lot of people was like that 2013, 2015, 2016 era. We had come off of that, but he won, like, that tournament, which is still meant something. He got a little bit of a push in Ring of Honor and went back to, then made it, like I said, made his run in New Japan. He debuted, early on, his real debut was teaming with Michael Elgin. You know, Elgin had been set up in New Japan already, you know, with his G1 and, you know, for a couple of years. He'd been there like 2 or 3 years at that point. And that was the way to help get Cobb over, was bringing him in, pretty much. And during all of this, again, like, mainstay in PWG, maybe took into some of his New Japan run, but, you know, he was doing some big things. You know, he had the TV title, all of that. You know, he had the Never title push for, like, they did a weird deal that, like, they gave Cobb the belt for a month and bounced it to Taichi. And long story short of all of this, I wasn't that impressed with him during any of this. You know, like, I'm not trying to hate on anybody, but to me, he wasn't a standout guy. You know, and they weren't really pushing him like that in New Japan during this time. You know, he was kind of like a mid-card guy. Again, a Never title level dude. They started the Empire stuff at that point. They had him team in the tag league with Okan. And it didn't really make a lot of... I mean, that was kind of his regular partner for much of his run, but it's not like it lit the world on fire. You know, let's be honest about that. But then I can point to exactly where he stepped up. The Never title in 2021 against Shingo at the Dome. I remember heading into that match, and he was popular among some people, but to me, I really didn't see it in him at all. I remember groaning at that, and I think people were starting to come off his bandwagon because he hadn't been impressive. When I was like, man, you could put Shingo against so many people, and you pick Cobb? Like, just because he's a foreigner? What is this? And then they had that match, and this was a different Cobb than we had ever seen before. You know, like, that match was so great. I still remember that match over 4 years later. It's got 9.21 rating, 5 stars from Meltzer. The main event got 5.25 with Ibushi and Jay White, and I can guarantee you Shingo and Cobb was the better match on that one. But that really led to the G1 where he got his big push. This was the year he went undefeated until the last night where Okada beat him. Like, that was a perfect use of him. Let him be an unstoppable monster. Let Okada fire his way up. And then finally, Okada beat him on the last night to advance to the final. It was so smart booking of Cobb there that it meant so much. And I think that was really the peak of his character. The sad thing is that 2021, he never really followed through with that. Like, from there, pretty much. Like, it really was a very territory-style push, I feel like. Like, they did a great job with him for that 1 year. And unfortunately, he had these mediocre years before and after. That. And he really didn't do much of note. I mean, they always keep him in rotation, give him a belt to keep him happy. He had the tag run with Okan. He had the TV title run last year, which I thought was actually pretty well done, all things considered. I mean, he had some good matches with that. His match with Ishii last year at Dominion was very good. I mean, he beat Zack and ended that title reign. And I thought he was a really good TV title guy. Shorter matches, could get his big power spots over, and, he didn't have to last long. That was good. It was a few months. It wasn't anything super spectacular, but a good run nonetheless. And then he just kind of drug on up to where we were at this year, with him winning the tag titles with Callum. And I think that, I mean, good for him to go out on a win, I suppose. But, to me, like I said, 2021 was the Cobb year where he was at his peak. And then after that, he never really was able to recapture it again. And he kind of regressed to his mean. It's all but assured he'll be going to WWE. But I don't think anybody thinks of this as a big loss, I have to say. A lot of New Japan fans probably aren't that, they're not panicking over this. Compare his reaction to what we got with Naito, and it's a world of difference. He's 42. I mean, this is his chance to make big money. If it all works out in WWE, I mean, we saw it with Jonah Rock, like Bronson Reed. Like, he took the bag, and they went up and down with him, for sure. Reed's had his moments, but I don't think anybody would say he's like a top star. And I think that's kind of Cobb's ceiling as a guy that might have some moments. I mean, he had that really brief run, and didn't they say he was like a hitman or something in AEW? Somebody hired him to like injure somebody or take him out, and he was gone very fast. His look, I mean, he's a tough looking guy. We know he's legit. I mean, he was an Olympian in the past. I'm not doubting his cred, and all of that at all. As a wrestler, he's good. If I were to rate him on a scale, I mean, promos are going to be interesting. He's an intense guy. He can convey that. Will he be able to do WWE's overly scripted promos? That remains to be seen. But they're not going to have a lot of time with him. Like I said, he's 42. Like, this isn't somebody you're going to... I mean, it's... With how they do it now, I mean, look at Paige and Spears and all that. Maybe they can put him in NXT. But if that happens, if he were to go to NXT instead of the main roster, I would see a very similar story to him in Lucha Underground in New Japan. You've got one monster push with him where he looks devastating. And then that's it. Like I said, if he had left after that Okada match in the G1 and signed with WWE then, I'm not even saying that's possible, but I'm saying if that was the end of his New Japan run, like, that would be looked at as a highly successful run. He would have felt hot coming off of it, and everyone would have praised him. But it drug on, and nothing of note happened. And now he's older, a little bit slower, maybe a little bit less explosive. It doesn't really show in his work at all, I would say. If he has lost a step, it doesn't come across to me very much. And as we know, like I said, he is a powerhouse. So that's really where I see his ceiling at. Like, NXT monster push for a few months, and then put somebody new over. And if he's in the main roster, I mean, a lot of people think they called him back to have a WrestleMania moment, quote unquote, this weekend. I'm skeptical of that and where he would fit in with their storylines right now. But we'll see. But like I said, Cobb cannot take away from his big run in 2021 as an overall run. Again, the reaction, the fanfare just isn't there. He didn't make that much of an impact, unfortunately. But was a good mid-card worker. And I respect his game. I think he really grew. But then the real stunner came after the next couple of days. And I know everybody here knows what I'm talking about. Everybody listen to this. And I know you know exactly who I'm talking about. That's right. Nobody thought this day would come, especially right now, considering where he was on the card and what it looked like. I mentioned it earlier. I mean, I mentioned it on the other show, the show I did with Striga. There's plans for this guy. And Bushi has quit New Japan. How could they let this happen? Okay, well, that did happen, to be fair. But the attached point is where it's really got people talking. Tetsuya Naito, the leader of Los Ingobernables de Japón, they put out a statement today saying that they were in talks for some time. They wanted to sign him. They mutually agreed after the 4th of May, like he will work out his dates and then he will be gone from New Japan. As well, Tanahashi, he made a public comment saying, quote, "I'm sorry to have brought you all such surprising and sad news today. I spoke with Naito yesterday. I told him that I wanted Naito, who loves New Japan, to stay with the company until the very end. But his will was firm and I couldn't change it. We will be respecting his wishes as he leaves the company. I ask for your continued support for Naito and Bushi during the remaining time in their company." I'm not seeing a lot of talk about him trying to make Bushi stay. Tanahashi, why did you let Bushi walk and you tried so hard for Naito? That's the first question that needs to be asked. I thought it was a good move to get out ahead of this because he signified to the fans, because obviously a lot of Japanese fans are not happy. A lot of fans all over the world are not happy about this. There are a ton of people, like there's a greater crowd connection with Naito than any other wrestler in New Japan, including Okada. That personal touch to a lot of LIJ and Naito fans, it was just different than any other type of fan base. So by putting this comment out, Tanahashi's ensuring that everyone knows we did not want this to happen. We did not want Naito to leave. We wanted him to stay. And, there are so many reasons that could have led to this. And there's so many branching paths that this domino falling could set into motion. From some of it may be good, some of it may be devastating. But like so many balls are up in the air right now, and that's what makes this story so fascinating and why I'm doing this update right now. I went over Cobb's history. I told you a bit about it. But this is a whole different level of, losing a guy. Tetsuya Naito was their most beloved star. He was the one, as I said, his fan base was just different. He's been, he was never positioned, unfortunately, as much as I feel he should have been at times. He never really got his true due from the company. I feel like, as the dude, you know. And if you look, like, this is how you know if somebody was really locked in and somebody who maybe wasn't during his run. If you just look at, if you go on Cage Match, and I'm going to do that right now. I'm going on Cage Match. Look at this. Go to his title history. 6-time Intercontinental Champion. 5-time World Champion. 3 with the IWGP Heavyweight and 2 with the current belt. Three-time Tag Team Champion. You know, he did his thing. Well, technically a 4-time with the junior title he originally had with Yujiro back in the days. You know, he had Yujiro, Sonata, Hiromu recently, like all you guys know. His tournament history. A 3-time G1 winner. Won the New Japan Cup, won the World Tag League. He's done it all in this company. This is one of their absolute top stars, and I think most people would have agreed. As great as this Goto run has been, and how successful it's been, most people think Naito is the top star of this company. To this day. However, if you look at those runs that he had, and particularly with the world titles, again, the original lineage and the new lineage, you know, as I said, he had 5 title reigns, like world title reigns. He got past a V1 defense 1 time in those 5 title reigns. And it was last year when he won it at the Dome. He defended against Sonata and then defended against Tsuji. After Tsuji won the New Japan Cup, they broke up his run with Moxley winning, which was a terrible decision for the native, but successful in America. Like, overall, again, it was a terrible decision, and maybe not even that. It was a terrible decision narratively, but they accomplished what they wanted to get more out of the American people. And besides that, every other reign with that world title, he got a V1 reign. 1 defense only, all 4 times. From 2016 to 2024. That's it. 1 V2 defense and 4 V1s. That's not what a top star is booked like, people. You know. Like, it is what it is. Not 5 times. It shows you that they never fully committed to him. Why that was, I can only speculate, but I've always considered that a huge black mark on Gato as a booker. And I mean, his loss at the Dome in 2017, I think, is one of the worst decisions they made. And if they had gone all the way then, that was really the time. Ultimately. It may have been 2018, actually, now that I think about it. But his loss to Okada, go back and watch that match, people. When that 3 count hit and Okada won, that crowd went silent. And that's like the worst reaction you could get, like, especially from a Japanese crowd. Like, when it goes that dead, that's like that white heat, you know, that it's so bad you don't want that. You know, like, you don't want that in Japan, dead silence. I mean, you don't want dead silence anywhere, but especially in Japan, it is a heavily negative connotation to do that. And, you know, I feel bad for him that they didn't go with him then. It was 2018, Wrestle Kingdom 12, when he lost to Okada. Which, by the way, a fantastic match. The finish was what it was and soured it for a lot of people. But in terms of wrestling, and this is the opposite case to what I mentioned. It was like good narratively, actually, like to have Okada win to set up stuff, but it was bad in business overall. And I think things would have been a lot different had that match gone a different way. And maybe his whole career would have been different. But the fact remains, like, you cannot tell me all of these V1 defenses are a sign that they truly bought into him as the guy. And it's a shame because he should have been. The fan support demanded it. His character, like, really would have benefited from a run like that. A few years ago, I wrote an article about this, actually, because his arc really reminded me of this guy. If you guys are an old school fan, I wonder if you'll agree with this or not. But I wrote it for, like, it was on Voices of Wrestling or something. And it was all about drawing a line and a parallel between Naito and Toshiaki Kawada, who is my all-time favorite All Japan wrestler. Anytime I'm on, post-Pro-Res, Long and Winding Royal Road, I'm usually talking about Kawada in some version. That's still one of the highlights of my career, by the way. You could still listen to that. If you've never heard that show, look it up, the audio biography me and WH Park did on Kawada. I thought that was truly some of my best work that I've ever done. One of the best shows we did here, and again, a big shout out to this guy because he's a genius at wrestling pretty much. And I know he's working on some more biographies. But when me and Cameron, Kinch Stalker, did the Inoki run, like we did that show, his first ever show. I thought that was like some of the absolute best work that I've been a part of. But he really did a lot of good for that. I kind of came in at the end, covered the ground the later years. But for much of the years, there was not a better Inoki biography done anywhere than what me and him did. But I really credit him a lot with that. The Kawada show, I really feel like I was the one that really made that. And WH is a wonderful host and a good friend. But I thought that I really brought it. Like, that was some of my best personal work that I'm most proud of. But I drew a line paralleling those two because if you look at Kawada's character in All Japan, he was the unchosen one. Pretty much. Like, that was his archetype. Always in the shadow of Misawa. Had a bunch of title reigns where he was a cursed champion. That was like one of the fan nicknames he got. Because whenever he'd win the Triple Crown, he'd lose it right away for some reason. Or occasionally get injured. They ended up making that right when Muto took over. And he got his legendary title reign out of it. But I thought that it was a great comparison piece. And you see a lot of the comparisons between All Japan in the 90s and New Japan today. Well, not really as much today, but before. Where, like, Misawa was similarly booked to Okada. Like, Okada's push was basically an updated version of that, starting off more heelish. But they really got over, because when he came in, he was this super cocky, rich guy that Gato had pegged as this super athlete and amazing wrestler. But that really dropped after a few years, By 2016 or so, he was a full babyface. Like, he had that 2 to 3 year run as more of a heelish version of himself. But by a while, he was just the rainmaker, the face of the company, the ace. And Naito was always kind of in his shadow in the booking room. Was that deliberate? Did they want to tell that story? Because I think it matches up well in how I wrote it all of those years ago. But I think that he really could have been the ace of the company if they wanted to go with it. They were so tangled up with Okada that they really couldn't move on from him. But, like, I really think he could have been even bigger. And he's already the biggest star. That tells you, like, how much upside he really has and how he is a legendary character in Japanese pro wrestling. I've been pretty vocal. As a wrestler, this is just Dylan Fox as a fan right now talking. I totally have matches of his that I love. And had some of the best matches in New Japan history, even. To me, my favorite matches of his were versus Tanahashi. Like that IC title feud they had, it was special. The G1 match they had was really great. I thought they had a really special chemistry above even like what Naito had with Okada. I think some people would mention Ibushi as one of his best opponents. And they had some incredible matches, don't get me wrong. No doubt. He tangled with all the top stars. Hell, I remember his first title shot against Okada, 2012. Like, that was Okada's big splash after winning the belt for the first time. Naito was his challenger. This was still well into Stardust Genius era. He hadn't even been injured yet. And from a character perspective, you have to say that, where Naito was basically picked as one of the absolute top guys of the future. They had him in his tag run with No Limit with Yujiro. And they quickly figured out that they felt that Naito had upside to be a top star. And they teased those waters, and he was very well received. People don't talk about that part. You're going to hear a lot of, biographies on him and talk about his career and retrospectives that, he was rejected as a babyface and then got over as a heel and became the most beloved guy. And what's obviously they're trying to recreate right now with Shota Umino. And very similar things, like they want to thread that together. But the real version is he was super popular with the fans. He was working as the Stardust Genius. And he was on a path to being a very successful generational type of rival for Okada. The problem that happened was he had a very severe leg injury. And pretty much immediately upon his return, they gave him a super push to win the G1. And his performance was not at that level. His matches weren't good. He was shook by the crowd on promos. Even when he won the G1, that promo he cut was not well received, where he basically was like, yeah, maybe I don't deserve it. But I'll keep fighting hard to be better. Which you don't really want the G1 winner to say that kind of thing. It's like, you just won the tournament, bro. And from there, as the story goes, he was rejected. The big boos, getting voted out of the Dome main event. And that led to his drastic character change by joining the original Los Ingobernables in Mexico. And from there, he pretty much took, shot off to the moon in terms of fan support. As I said, I personally don't think they got everything they could out of him. And I still don't. The thing is, I think we can presume this was not known very long term. The date that's been thrown out is he was, they were told this on the 3rd of this month. But how could you not build, and maybe they were, maybe that was going to come anyway, and just the timing of it all cut that off. But the fact that we're not having a Goto Naito match is a real shame. And it's something we've seen before with Okada. And that was much more contentious. As far as we know, again, there could be so many reasons for this leaving for Naito. We can only speculate, and I'm going to speculate. Don't get me wrong, I'm not going to leave you guys out in the cold. But with Okada, we know there was a great amount of heat for various reasons. Again, there's another show for that. It's not the time. But that lasted for over a year and still lasts to this day. With Naito, they had to have a plan for him, but his body has broken down. Everybody knows that, including him. They tried to book him in a way to protect him with this tag run with Hiromu. And in a lot of ways, the way things have gone the last year or two, after everything's happened with the title, his title reign was a big success, before they broke it up with Moxley. But he was clearly still a draw. But the fact remains, in a lot of ways, him versus Hiromu was the drawing match on this year's Wrestle Kingdom. That was a match that people had wanted for years. And it bombed. Like, it was not successful at all. And that goes to show, like, is the breaking, in a case of emergency break glass for Naito, are those days over with the fans too? And let's be honest, this is going to be a not great topic to get into, but I think it's worth mentioning. There's a lot of signs that and I mean, it's not just signs, we know it's true. The economical situation in Japan, and really everywhere in the world, for all sorts of reasons, again, we don't have to get into that, but it's bad right now. People don't have the same amount of money as they used to. It doesn't go as far as it used to. Let's be real about it. Going back to the pandemic, there were people that were going to shows before the pandemic, and they don't go to them anymore. Where did these fans go? It's just one of those things. Did people just move on with their lives, Like, the pandemic happened. People were scared. The scene changed so much with wrestling. And it's just one of those things that, like, they loved it as a hobby. Maybe they got a little older and they bounced. And it was just one of those things that they moved on from. It happens to so many people, no matter what country you're from. And unfortunately, the company is now feeling the effects of this. And particularly with a company like Bushiroad, who specializes in gacha type of games, that requires a lot of spending on their players' parts, which was lucrative for a long time. But if people have less money, they spend less money. If they spend less money, companies make less money. And if you make less money, you have to pay people less money. And, I've heard, again, this isn't like a locked, situation, but I've heard that basically a lot of these guys coming in, like, they've opened the doors to people like outside of the company. Look at Jake last year. But a lot of people coming in that, the pay is not what it used to be. The pay is not as much as they thought it was. A lot of people aren't happy. People are taking pay cuts. We knew that already. We've known that years ago, that they were slashing, salaries. And, what has been said, a big reason for that is a lot of wrestlers and a lot of declining attendance at the same time. You've got more mouths to feed on this roster, and the company's not drawing what it used to. The Dome was said to be a disaster, and we knew that. Again, Kidani came out and said it publicly. That's not a secret. Like, he said it. He admitted it. We know that. And these are the effects when you're a struggling company. It's happened before in other companies. I lived through Noah. Like, when, after Misawa passed away, attendances dropped, things went downhill, people were making less money. That's all there is to it. Like, if you have a terrible thing that happens and your company is going downhill, obviously that was a tragic situation with Misawa, and the COVID situation hurt many companies, not just New Japan. But for some reason, they were not able to grab their fan base through it. They did not entertain them, whatever the reason was. But they left, I brought it up years ago during the pandemic. Remember the fight in the Dome? Sold out the Dome in the middle of the pandemic. And that was a sign. Like, to me, that was a wake-up call. People didn't want to admit it. People loved going to the boxing match. Had no problem seeing that. Like, in a way, it's bigger than ever. People wanted to see it. They did not want to see the product New Japan was putting out. Not enough to pay for it. That's a factual statement, folks. I've heard some people say there's not as much opportunities as they would like among the native wrestlers. That's just a rumor. I don't know if it's true. It's worth speculating on. Does Naito see this economic downturn? Maybe say, hey, Bushi Road, it might be bad. This company's not looking in great shape. They put Goto as the champion. We know they never wanted to do that. And I got to get the hell out of here while I still can. But, I don't want to go down with the ship. It's possible. I'm not saying it's for sure true. I do know that a lot of these questions are not going to remain a secret for long. Because come August, guess whose annual finances are going to be posted? And if that comes in looking red up and down, if things look bad, well, that could be a sign that there's fire to the smoke. Pretty much. But still, Naito, great wrestler at his peak, had many great matches. The last couple of years, it's been really sad to watch. Kenta type of level we're hitting at. And I personally, again, he's had great matches and was a great wrestler. He was never my personal favorite, I do have to say, as an in-ring guy. I think he's another one of that school of like Nakamura, where you can point towards, or even Okada in a lot of ways, you can point towards a handful of great matches a year, but there's also a lot of times he didn't really put in the best, his best. But the last few years, there's been basically, it's been all bad. I think he's been really hard to watch. He was probably my least favorite performer last year in the G1, to be honest. Including Callum. For whatever reason. This is another point. Because I mentioned at the start of this, Okada's run was very contentious at the end. There was a lot of heat. Naito, we don't know about this, but I do know he didn't put over anybody. Why? Except for Callum in this tag match. Like the person he loves so much, apparently, wrestled him all these times. What? You have to think that they're kicking themselves not to have Hiromu win that dome match at this point. Again, I don't know that. I haven't heard anything like that. But just logically, they wish that Hiromu had won this overall. So, the Naito April Fool's Day post had some, again, it turned out there was more to it. Bushi leaving with him makes you wonder at that end. And that kind of brings up the future. Where is this going? Where's he going? They announced he would go freelance. That opens the door to possibilities. Maybe even possibilities for Bushi. Who knows? Bushi, again, I really liked him when he first came in. I remember his All Japan run where he was like a robot character. I think it was like T-37, something like that. He's really good. Really underrated guy on the undercards for a long time. He had a bad injury. And pretty much ever since he came to LIJ, I really have... It's not like he's this terrible worker. He's just boring. There's really no accolades for him outside of some junior tag stuff with Hiromu. He's a fine hand who works hard. I know that he wrestled a lot. He was super reliable the last few years. If you look at the cage match, he actually ranked first in total matches wrestled in New Japan for the last few years. And, that's admirable, but he was in low-stakes matches, usually multi-mans, and he didn't really add a lot to them, to be honest. We talked about it last week. The junior, Best of Super Juniors, we didn't care what he was doing. He was one of the first guys we pointed to that could have been cut off. And he's older now. And I know he started young, but the fact remains. You know, he's been around a long time. He's the same age as Cobb, 42. How old is Naito? Let's see here. That has to be around where he's at. Yeah, both 42. To be honest with you, you know, Bushi, again, was a fan at one point, haven't been for a long time, but popular with the guys backstage, and, you know, has a cool look, but that's about it. What could all this mean? I won't lie. We have to address the elephant in the room on all of this. Are we sure that they're really leaving? Like, is this all a work? Or is it real, technically, but they're still just going to keep wrestling, you know, in New Japan? There's no rule that says, much like Tom Nakano in Stardom, you could be a freelancer and keep wrestling for the company. Let's be real. I wouldn't write it off entirely. The thing that makes me think that won't happen is they canceled a show I saw on July the 4th that was meant to be really built around those two, like, you know, Naito and Bushi. Having a homecoming show with two guys who aren't there isn't going to fly. So that makes me think this is legit. You know, but I do think we have to at least acknowledge the possibility of that. In terms of Naito as a wrestler, I think if you're a New Japan fan, your most hopeful and best case scenario is if you see Naito take off for a few months, rest his body, you know, build some intrigue back into himself and his character, build to a big return, and maybe show up at the Dome. You know, skip that G1, skip Dominion, skip King of Pro Wrestling, Tag League and all that. Announce he's back for a big Dome match. Rested, replenished. Maybe he could put his best foot forward for, you know, like one more major run. Because let's face it, it would be sad to see him go out this way. Again, he was never my favorite like LIJ fans, but I still respected his game and definitely think he was a top star and one of the biggest stars they've ever had. He deserves a retirement show, you know, like he deserves a retirement at the level of Tanahashi. And that's another thing that I don't understand. I mean, and we'll see what they do. They may switch some stuff around and put Naito with one more big match. I mean, everything, you know, it was smart of them in hindsight to book Newman versus Goto because that's a dead match on paper. And now with Naito's last match being at Dontaku, everything's sold out pretty much. Like, everybody wants to see Naito. So from a publicity standpoint, it's highly successful and proven once again how much of a draw Naito is. My expectation would be something like a Tanahashi match, like one more for the president. They could do a multi-man tag, maybe put over a young guy if they want. But I think I would like to see how this goes. Even if it's real, let him take a few months off and see where he's at the end of the year. Because they'll be happy to take him back. I'm pretty sure. And he might be even more meaningful that way. If he takes it, you know, let's say he took a full year off. Let's say he waited until the Dome in 2027. That could mean that much more. And like I said, it gives him a chance to rest. And he needs that as a human being. He needs that time to rest. So I am very happy if that is the case. I've seen a lot of people speculate on him going to America. And I really don't think that's going to happen. I do have to say. Now, this is all truly in the hands of them. Like, in my opinion. If they want him bad enough, they can make it work. I mean, with WWE, he has no... Like, I just can't imagine it at all. Unless, like I said, unless they're kind of not... Because they're not that educated on him and you know, how broken down he is, they may just know, okay, he's one of their top stars. Let's try and bring him over. And if they offer him an ass load of money, he might just say, look, I can't turn this down. Again, this economic style. that may be coming into play in all this. We don't know that. That's speculation. We do not know that. But if that is something he's thinking about, could he sign a year or two deal with WWE? Have a run? Get paid a lot? It's not impossible. I would say the chances are super low. Super low. But you cannot write that off, because money will always talk, even to someone like Naito, who's been pretty aggressively against, New Japan publicly, like expanding to America. But how many wrestlers have lied before, let's be honest? Or changed their mind when, when that money comes through? Look at Gunther. When he was in WXW, I remember he had an interview where he said he would never go to America. Like, that was why he didn't want to go. Remember, he hung out in UK, like NXT UK that time. He was like, no, I'll never go to America. What did he do? Go to the main roster, eventually. Because he knew that that's how he was going to make the most money. But I don't see it. Like, in Naito's circumstance, I don't even see what he would even add to a WWE crowd who probably doesn't know anything about him. I mean, they'll hype him up. They'll make him seem like this huge deal. And his charisma's strong, but I don't think I just don't think it would work. AEW, Tony Khan, if he says, by God, like, I need to get Naito, then, same deal. If he pays enough, he can get him. We have not seen any evidence of that, though. He's never really done that much with Naito at all. These Forbidden Door shows, maybe there's heat. Maybe he took some of Naito's comments to heart. I don't know. Like, overall. Maybe Naito just does not want to wrestle in America or live here. That's totally fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. At all. But if that's not true, and he desperately wants him and needs to pair him with Okada and feel like they've got all the top stars of the world, which he is one to this day. If you look at the entire world of wrestling, take companies or whatever out of it, Naito's still one of the top stars on this planet when it comes to pro wrestling. Don't let anyone fool you on that. No matter how much I may dislike watching him wrestle. But still, I would say that's a very low possibility. It's very unlikely to happen. I wouldn't worry about either of those companies making a move for Naito. I guess the closest thing that could happen is, because we know NXT, again, they're not afraid to do weird shit on there. So they might pull another move like they had with Liger. Bring Naito in for one match, let him have his moment. Which would be a trip. Like, if that happened, it would be sad. Like, to see him in that warehouse coming in. Nobody wants that. The worst thing that could happen is if he wrestled Nakamura. I think. I mean, how much would Naito not care about being in WWE as a wrestler? That might be the big draw of him going as a fan, is to see just how little effort he puts into that company. But same thing in AEW. I don't think he would try much harder there either, to be honest. And on top of it, Tony, it's not like he's really gotten a lot out of Okada, all things considered. Especially if those numbers are true that he's paid this $1 million contract to Okada. He hasn't been worth it at all. If that's true, he hasn't added anything. If Okada left tomorrow, the show would be fine. Like, there would be almost no difference. Anybody can go out there and say bitch every week. It's not that hard. His wrestling is not very good at the moment. Like, he's extremely replaceable. And if he is one of the top paid guys, maybe that will make Tony a little gun shy about some of these top New Japan stars. But you never know. Like, you never know what's going through these companies' heads. WWE is like a conglomerate, like pure business and all that crap, like the evil empire. Tony Khan, he kind of runs the show there. You guys know this already. Like, there's just no logic to it. I just don't think it's very likely. I think the only company in Japan that would be able to bring him in would be Noah. They've got the backing. If they just don't give a crap and are like, look, we have a chance to do something special with Naito. Another kind of gimmick run like we saw with Muto. His hero, like Muto and Naito are directly linked. They always will be. And he's been aligned with Noah. So, at that point, if you're Naito, Muto's been such an inspirational figure to you. You wrestled him in his last match. You're probably going to get paid. Like, they're not going to cheap out on you, probably. You might not even get paid as much as in New Japan. But Cyber Agent has shown that they're not afraid of that. Maybe a Bima jumps in and foots some of the bill. That could be a possibility. You get Bushi a job. Because if that happens, Bushi's coming. Like, he's going to follow Naito. Bushi in the junior, Naito in the heavyweights, maybe build a new version of LIJ and Noah. To fight Team 2000. Maybe he takes over Team 2000 for Ozawa. Like, that brings upon his heel turn, or his babyface turn, I guess. I could see that happening, honestly. If he wants to keep going, and I'm sure they'd acquiesce him too, if he said, look, guys, I can't do a full-time schedule anymore. You give me one match a month. Maybe a few times a year you give me an option for a couple more with, teaming with Bushi. 15, 20 matches a year is all I've got, guys. They would acquiesce to that. Maybe even less, maybe even less than that. Maybe just 12 matches a year. They would acquiesce to that. And maybe, hopefully, if it goes well, they could try to get him for one, like an N1 or something down the line. But again, this is speculation. Nothing's been confirmed at all. Could be good. It could be good for Noah if that happened. Maybe even good for him. Again, the roster needs people. That's all there is to it. Like, Bushi would, again, for his part, would almost assuredly get a junior title run out of it. Naito could get the world title and GHC title and do a lot of good with it. Maybe they give him that big run he never got in New Japan. The others are almost a non-starter. Like, just because of monetary issues. So, I don't even really consider them. Even something like Glate, which is kind of like a money mark promotion everyone views it as, has kind of cut back lately. They're trying to save money for once. They're still not profitable at all, but they don't just have an open pocketbook like they used to. So I really don't see that anymore. Him and Nakajima would be a great match though, if they got to it for the fans. I don't think there's any Naito match that would be great these days. Again, maybe he goes away for a few months and refocuses and rests up, and we can see the Stardust Genius level Naito one more time. But I doubt it, to be honest. I'm not interested in him as a wrestler anymore. It's more so what his name value and star power brings to a company. And again, I just don't think anybody would pay that. I wouldn't be surprised if he takes off because it's meant so much to him. If he has if his version of wrestling is to take a little bit of a vacation down to Mexico City, wrestle in Arena Mexico for a few months. You get an easy schedule there. He loves the culture, loves the city. Hang out for a year or so in Mexico, and then hit New Japan again on the backside. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. The funny thing is, I've heard from people, again, this is more rumor mongering I'm about to throw out, because I think his reputation is as is of this really weird guy, kind of like Naito. But I've heard from a lot of people that he actually has a really astute mind for wrestling. I mean, that was his, the genius, the Stardust genius because he is known as a mastermind of pro wrestling. Like, a longtime fan, super knowledgeable. All of that's, I know that part's true. But he's very well respected for his wrestling mind. I really don't think this was a situation where he just rolled out of the bed one day and was like, time for me to quit New Japan. I think this was very well thought out. He saw the signs of his body. He saw the signs of the company and the economic situation in the country and the world. And he's following all of these things. And what he exactly was the straw that broke the camel's back, I don't know. Nobody knows. Only he knows. He might comment on it for all we know. He might give an interview next week. He might give an interview tomorrow, where he explains his intentions, his goals, why he left. That's extremely possible. And this show will be very outdated quickly. But, that said, what about the last option? Because I've seen this floated about too, and it's something I think is really interesting, especially considering Bushi left as well. Who's to say, in his time in New Japan, hanging out with all of these sponsors, all of these big wigs at these events that they send him to, maybe whatever behind the scenes contacts Bushi Road got him in with, who's to say he didn't, round together a group of investors, people to put together funding and start his own promotion? LIJ Pro or something like that. I mean, we've seen it before. With Hashimoto was obviously the big one when he started 0-1 after being the top, one of the top stars of New Japan. Could we see Naito start his own company? What would it look like? Who would he get on his side? Who would want to jump up with him? I'll tell you this. This Japanese wrestling scene in the year of our Lord 2025, guess what, fellas and girls, non-binaries, whatever you identify as. This Japanese wrestling scene is not healthy right now. From New Japan all the way to the bottom of the basement monster running heat up that we talked about last week. That string I talked about really last week. This is not a healthy situation for this Japanese pro wrestling scene right now. This is one of the lowest points ever for New Japan as a company. So are you really going to roll the dice and start your own company in this scene right now? On the other hand, New Japan's weak right now. If you did have a lot of funds, maybe you grab up some people. Maybe some of your old LIJ buddies jump ship with you. Maybe he sits around and waits a year before he starts that. Before he leaves, he might have a conversation with the LIJ guys and be like, look, guys, 1 year from now, LIJ Pro is coming. And I need all of you here with me. Hiromu, you'll be my first world champion. I need you to come over. And we've got all of this money behind it. That's really the main thing about it, though. Like, a company starting up wouldn't be that terrible of an idea if there's money behind it. If he doesn't have that kind of investment, that's not a good sign. Maybe he could reach out to Muto again, get some of the Abima guys on his side. Muto could be a figurehead president of the company. You got his old buddy Ibushi hanging around. He's blacklisted everywhere, pretty much. Might want to bring his ass in too. You could grab guys from here or there, create your own roster, 10 to 20 guys, roll the dice as some freelancers, maybe drag somebody, some legends out of retirement, I guess, and try and put something together. The problem is that all of the last few tries at this has basically been a failure. Whether it was Wrestle 1 or Glate, it hasn't worked out. Marigold, a recent Joshi company, has had its struggles. It's not all bad. We talked about it multiple times. They've improved over the last few years. And they've done some cool, not the last few years, the last year. They haven't even had their first year anniversary yet. That was stupid of me to say. But they've improved the last year from the start to now. They've done some cool stuff. They ran Sumo Hall. It was ambitious. Was it super successful? Not really. But they did their thing. And they're moving forward in, again, not a great Joshi scene at this point. You know, they're one of the top companies, and it has to be respected. If Naito started his own company, by default almost, it would be one of the top companies, you know, in Japan right now. I think it would be up there. And it really would depend on the economy of it. You know, like how much money do they have? But I wouldn't write it off. Those are all what-if scenarios, but they're all plausible. They're not impossible. It makes a lot of logical sense when you think about it. Maybe there was a lot of truth to those interviews he gave, speaking out about New Japan management. He's sick of being under somebody else's thumb. He's like, no, I'm in charge now. We're doing stuff my way. That could, I mean, again, I never really trust wrestlers speaking publicly, but it's possible. It's very, very much possible. So, either way, it's interesting news. There's a lot that's going on with it that we don't know about. Not just me, you, people with even deeper sources. I've heard there's a lot of people being tight-lipped on this. Like I said, too. So, is it bad? Is it good? You know, what is it? What caused this? Naito's the only one that knows. As for the future, there's a lot of options. I've laid them all out for you pretty much and gave you my take on what I think is the most likely. I'll tell you this. The thing I don't think is going to happen at all, like I think there's the lowest possibility, is that he just rides off into the sunset. And again, we don't know what's going on in his head. We don't know if he's struggling, you know, with mental issues or anything like that. Like, we don't know that. Again, we don't know this man as a man. We know Tetsuya Naito, the character, but not Naito, the real life person. And I mean, I'm hopeful that he's in good spirits. You know, Tanahashi mentioned in his statement that he had a strong will for something. So I'm hopeful that whatever his plan is, it comes to fruition as he likes it to, as he wants it to. And it can lead to some cool stuff in the future. Because I do think a lot of those options are good. And I did kind of write off the other promotions besides Noah. But who's to say the All Japan president just, you know, scrounges up, like dials up his whole Rolodex of numbers of people he knows and annoys them enough to where they can build to one big Naito match in All Japan. And they're like, all right, fine. You know, like, we'll get him for a big match, Naito versus Kento. Does he want to put over people, too, again? That's another thing. I mean, he put over Callum. In the tag match, at least. Not anybody else, really, though. And that's kind of a failing on New Japan's part. This should be a lesson. Like, when you're trying to build up the new generation, you can't just half-ass it. You can't wait around. You got to do it. You got to go. You cannot wait. You cannot go halfway, like I said. Like, don't wait until your top stars currently leave, because you never know what could happen. And now they're at a point where that day may never come where Naito puts over Shota Umino, Tsuji. What happens if he leaves and we never see those matches? New Japan looks like idiots for allowing that to happen. And for whatever reason, it didn't get drilled through their thick heads when Okada left without putting anybody over. But this should be a lesson. Don't wait around. If you've got guys you want to push them, put them over, and deal with the fallout later. You know, if they leave, so be it. But you have to look at the long term. And they failed at that again. Just like with Nakamura. Just like with Okada. Did it again. And let it slip through their fingers what they could have had. So with that said, I think I've covered about everything, you know. And maybe he has some kind of master plan again. Maybe he wants to do some kind of freelance tour. But if anything, I do think that he is not just going to go quietly into retirement. You know, just going to walk away and leave. That's not going to happen, in my opinion. And it would be a damn shame if he did without a major retirement angle. Look at this Tanahashi retirement run. They put his title match at a small venue. That could have sold out a huge show. Why are they fumbling this retirement so much? Noah, for all of their criticisms we could have, and particularly about Keiji Muto and Noah, they absolutely milked his retirement run geniusly, and it led to a big show that outdrew the Wrestle Kingdom that year. They could have done the same with Tanahashi. They could do the same with Naito, even now. Like, they could, like, rush to do something. Make a big match. I mean, it doesn't matter now because it's already sold out. So I guess they really can't now. But it was smart to put that Callum main event in a dead main event because Naito basically was going to sell out no matter what when he announced this. But they can still sort something out and have a big retirement match. Why not? You know, we'll see what happens. But as I said, I've gone through the scenarios. From it being a work, it's all a lie. He's just going to keep working for New Japan eventually. Just take some time off. Going to Mexico. I don't think he'll go to America, but I mean, it's possible. Like I said, if enough money comes, that could very well happen. Starting his own company. Going to Noah. But most importantly, I hope Naito, again, the man more so than the character, I hope these guys, and Bushi too, you know, I really think he's going to be attached to the hip to Naito. And you know, Bushi's a guy, he's not like somebody that's going to be struggling, you know, either. It's not like he needs it. It's really about what he wants to do. He's got his own stuff going on, you know. It's been said that he's got a little bit of change saved up. I mean, I don't know how that is for the family. Something else he's up to business-wise. You know, but it seems like he's set up pretty well to where he was like, look, man, my boy's out. You couldn't get it done with my guy, who's the top star? Nah, I gotta go, guys. That's kind of how it comes across to me. You know, and he wasn't there where... Because there's certain guys in that company that they'll never leave as long as that paycheck comes in. Even if they cut wages, they know the lay of the land. And they know it's not going to match up to what New Japan's doing. But if you're in a situation where you've made it on your own, you don't need these sorts of things. And again, maybe that's something Naito's thinking too, that he doesn't want to be emboldened to these companies anymore. And that obviously inspired Bushi to go his own route as well. If he wants to have a run, I don't see a big market for him. But I'm sure Noah would roll the dice on a former New Japan guy. Like, they've got Kenta in there already. All Japan's where he came up. It could be meaningful for him to have a run. Maybe that's a place he thinks that he could like be like a... Well, I mean, things have changed so much since he left, though, that I don't really foresee it. But... you know, that could be a possibility. Go back home where he started. But I think Noah's a more greater possibility for him, personally. You know, he's not going to command the price Naito is. And if Naito does something, I do think that will help Bushi a lot as well. And again, wherever he goes, I think you could definitely, especially if it's Noah, I think he's going to get that junior title. Maybe he thinks he can go heavyweight. I don't know. In Noah, it's possible. They have plenty of small heavyweights. I don't think so. But maybe that's something he's thinking of. Maybe this is all part of some grander plan we don't know about. Maybe tomorrow, 3 more guys say they're leaving New Japan, and I do another breaking audio for this. But hopefully not that, because that would be kind of bad for the company and the scene right now, which, as I said, is already not healthy. But anyway, hopefully you enjoyed it. Glad you took the time to listen. Hopefully you like that I did this kind of mini-sode here. It's a good length, but it wasn't that long either. You know, it's about the size of my normal Patreon type of reviews and stuff like that. I'm going to cover some WrestleMania weekend shows. I gotta say, they're not looking that good to me. Like, a lot of these Japanese companies coming over to America did not put their best foot forward. But I will watch them. I'm very much looking forward to the GGUSA revival. That meant a lot to me. But as a whole, WrestleMania weekend looks kind of like a fad that was dead. That is dead now, and it was hot 8 years ago. It's not as great anymore, but we'll see how it goes. With that said, though, keep your eyes peeled for that. Got to talk about a lot of wrestling on the Patreon, on the free show. We got some cool stuff planned. Episode 300, the real 300th episode, is coming up. It's going to be a great show. Really proud of the Eastern Lariat. 9 years I've been on this show. All the way back in 2016. I still remember it like it was yesterday. You know, it's very meaningful, that time period. So, you know, very cool to be on here. Still kicking, still doing things the best we've ever done in a lot of ways. Hopefully you guys enjoyed my rambling, I guess. You know, it was a one-person show, but that's okay. I hope you guys had a lot of fun. Let us know what you think. Hit us up on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. At Eastern Lariat. Blue Sky, Eastern Lariat. Instagram, Eastern Lariat. Let's go for it. You know, let us know what you think of Naito. What do you think he's going to do? Again, I laid out a bunch of possibilities. Did I forget something? Do you have something in mind that I didn't even think of? Do you agree with what I said about him? What's some of your favorite Naito matches? I think there's a lot of great discussion to think about. And we'll probably think about it more and talk about it more once we get closer to Dontaku and his leaving, at least for now, of New Japan. But as always, we really appreciate the comments. Oh, YouTube, of course, my favorite place for comments. Definitely talk to us there, and I will definitely respond to you. Really appreciate all you guys out there. Thank you guys for listening. And until next time, you know I love you. Sayonara.
vacated.